Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In this video, we're going to be discussing Lord Voldemort and a little object that we know called a time turner. Lord Voldemort was the darkest and most feared dark wizard of all time, and during his initial rise to power, he left destruction in his wake. The First Wizarding War was responsible for the death and destruction of many good witches and wizards, and it wasn't until Voldemort stumbled into the Potter's humble home in Godric's Hollow that his reign of terror finally ended. It was Halloween in the year 1981, and Voldemort, seeking out the Potters in an attempt to stop Sybil Trelawney's prophecy from coming true, travelled there with one goal in mind: kill the boy. When he entered the Potter residence, he quickly put an end to James Potter, and then started making his way towards Lily and baby Harry. One outcome that I'm sure Voldemort didn't predict that night was that he would be defeated. Voldemort mentioned to Lily that if she stepped aside and let him have Harry, that he would spare her life. She obviously refused and was subsequently murdered by Voldemort's Avada Kedavra. When Voldemort next advanced towards Harry, he let out one final Avada Kedavra, hoping to put an end to the boy. However, what Voldemort didn't know was that Lily had placed a loving sacrifice on Harry, an ancient and powerful form of magical protection. When Voldemort used Avada Kedavra, it instantly rebounded and was deflected back at him. This marked the end of the First Wizarding War and the end of Lord Voldemort, at least for a time. At the time of his initial defeat, witches and wizards throughout the wizarding world rejoiced at the prospect of his demise, thinking that it was the end of Voldemort forever. However, what people didn't know is that while Voldemort's physical form was destroyed, he remained alive. He was bodiless and powerless, but his life force was untouched, the result of his Horcruxes. 14 years later, in the year 1995, the return of the Dark Lord was official, and Voldemort was finally able to be restored to a proper physical form in which he reattained his full magical power. Voldemort finally getting his body back was the result of the regeneration potion, a potion consisting of bone of father, flesh of servant, and blood of foe. Wormtail helped Voldemort source these ingredients and brew the potion. Voldemort having his physical form back meant that the wizarding world was back at square one. The darkest wizard of all time had returned, was getting stronger by the day, and they no longer had the Potters around. After getting his body back, Voldemort once again caused all sorts of turmoil in the wizarding world, effectively marking the beginning of the Second Wizarding War. After a few more years of murder, oppression, and a general sense of unease amongst witches and wizards, Voldemort is eventually defeated by Harry Potter during the Battle of Hogwarts. This marked the definitive end of Voldemort. So, the First Wizarding War began in the year 1970, and the Second Wizarding War ended in the year 1998. That marks 28 years of a looming dark presence upsetting the wizarding world. Sure, people thought that he was gone for a while, but he came back. They just had a bit of a break. We know how Harry Potter ends, and we know that Voldemort is unsuccessful in securing a shroud of darkness over the world, but that doesn't mean that he didn't cause a lot of grief. Surely with the advent of all of these special magical potions, spells, and technologies, there must have been someone, or something, that could have helped the good guys more effectively address this Voldemort problem. Something like, oh, I don't know, a time turner? A time turner is a magical device manufactured by the Department of Mysteries that is used for time travel. Given the potential usefulness of a time turner, which allows for time travel, one might expect that this technology would have been used more in the fight against evil. So why wasn't it? In theory, after the Ministry of Magic recognized how dangerous a young Tom Riddle would become, couldn't they have used a time turner to stop him before he, oh, I don't know, created Horcruxes? How about before he formed an army of Death Eaters? What about as soon as he was born? Before we get into this, we need to recognize the distinct differences between the two types of time turners. The first type of time turner is called a typical time turner. It has been stated that the number of times that someone turns the hourglass on this time turner's timepiece directly corresponds to the number of hours that you can travel back in time. However, this time turner is limited in that you are only able to travel back a maximum of 5 hours. This is to protect the user and preserve the fabric of time. In the 1993 school year, McGonagall gifts a time turner to Hermione so that she is able to attend additional classes. Hermione's immense workload finally seemed to be getting to her. Every night, without fail, Hermione was seen to be in a corner of the common room, several tables spread with books, arithmancy charts, rune dictionaries, diagrams of muggles lifting heavy objects, and file upon file of extensive notes. She barely spoke to anybody and snapped when she was interrupted. Each of these typical time turners has an inscription that reads, "I mark the hours, every one, nor have I yet outrun the sun. My use and value unto you are gauged by what you have to do." In the year 2020, more advanced time turners were introduced that allowed the user to stay in the past for as long as they want and return to the future whenever they want. These time turners are referred to as true time turners and were created by Theodore Nott while he was working for Lucius Malfoy. So, in theory, the first type of time turner, the typical time turner, wouldn't be able to stop Voldemort because it doesn't even have the capability of bringing someone back that far. I mean, sure, it could definitely still be useful, but as far as stopping Voldemort at childhood is concerned, that's basically off the table. Which brings us to the second type of time turner, the true time turner, which we know can bring people back as far as they want, for as long as they want. Right off the bat, this sounds like good news. Great, we can just use this time turner, go back as far as we want, and we can stop Voldemort before everything blows up. However, there are equally as many issues, actually no, there are way more issues with this time turner. Technically it would work, but you would never use it for something like this. Here's why. According to Professor Saul Croker, who has spent his entire career in the Department of Mysteries studying time magic, as our investigations currently stand, the longest period that may be relived without the possibility of serious harm to the traveller or to time itself is around 5 hours. We have been able to encase single-hour reversal charms, which are unstable and benefit from containment, in small enchanted hourglasses that may be worn around a witch or wizard's neck and revolved according to the number of hours the user wishes to relive. All attempts to travel back further than a few hours have resulted in catastrophic harm to the witch or wizard involved. It was not realized for many years why time travelers over great distances never survive their journeys. All such experiments have been abandoned since 1899, when Eloise Mintumble became trapped for a period of 5 days in the year 1402. Now we understand that her body had aged 5 centuries in its return to the present and irreparably damaged. She died in St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries shortly after we managed to retrieve her. What is more, her 5 days in the distant past caused great disturbance to the life paths of all those she met, changing the course of their lives so dramatically that no fewer than 25 of their descendants vanished in the present, having been unborn. Essentially, time turners are not a reliable way of affecting the past without the possibility, or actually, more like extreme likelihood, of causing dire and entirely unpredictable consequences in the present. Entirely removing the existence of a figure like Voldemort would cause presumably massive ramifications. A term in chaos theory that references this is called the butterfly effect, which is the sensitive dependence on initial conditions in which a small change in one state of a deterministic non-linear system can result in large differences in a later state. Or as Professor Saul Croker so eloquently puts it, just as the human mind cannot comprehend time, so it cannot comprehend the damage that will ensue if we presume to tamper with its laws. And that's why defeating Voldemort wasn't as simple as just turning back time. J.K. Rowling has actually expressed concern surrounding her introduction of time turners and the notion of time travel in her books, and said the following in an interview. "I went far too light-heartedly into the subject of time travel in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. While I do not regret it, it opened up a vast number of problems for me. Because, after all, if wizards could go back and undo problems, where were my future plots?" She continues, "I solved the problem to my own satisfaction in stages. Firstly, I had Dumbledore and Hermione emphasize how dangerous it would be to be seen in the past, to remind the reader that there might be unforeseen and dangerous consequences, as well as solutions in time travel. Secondly, I had Hermione give back the only time turner ever to enter Hogwarts. And thirdly, I smashed all remaining time turners during the battle in the Department of Mysteries, removing the possibility of reliving even short periods in the future. This is just one example of the ways in which, when writing fantasy novels, one must be careful what one invents. For every benefit, there is usually a drawback." Time travel is a vastly complicated subject that deserves a lot of consideration, and I think that it may have been slotted into the books and films just a little bit hastily. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope that this answered the question. If you guys enjoy the content, please remember to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Until next time,
you're a wizard, Harry!